Head on the poles. Praise the Lord Jesus Christ. Break up the fallow ground. Um, so, the last video with the exorcist, Harrison Garrison, a little bit, Paris tasing them after that, and the exorcist. But it sounds like a crowd of people talking. I'm reading the last one, so anyway. Got my glasses on. It looks so much better without my glasses. I'm not talking about my face. Oh, I look. Is that what y'all are saying? Yeah. Chapter XXVII. That is 27. We made a gallant. This one's as good as the other ones. Oh, I thought they were the blues. Wow. We made a gallant show the next day when we filled out to the frowning gates of Orleans, with banners flying and Joan and the grand staff in the van of the long column. These two young de Lava were come now and were joined to the grand staff, which was well, war being their proper trade, for they were grandsons of that illustrious fighter, Bertrand de Gouslin, Consul of France in early days, Louis de Bourbon, the Marshal de Rez, and the Dame de Chatsworth was added also. We had a right to feel a little uneasy, for we knew that a force of 5,000 men was on the way under Sir John Fastolf to reinforce Jargeau, but I think we were not uneasy. In truth, that force was not yet in our neighborhood. Sir John was loitering for some reason or other. He was not hurrying. Precious time. 4 days at Tampes and 4 more at Janville. We reached Jargeau and began business at once. Joan sent forward a heavy force which hurled itself against the outworks in handsome style and gained a footing and fought hard to keep it. But it presently began to fall back before a sortie from the city. Seeing this, Joan raised her battle cry and led a new assault herself under a furious artillery fire. The paladin was struck down at her side, wounded, but she snatched her standard from his failing hand and plunged on through the ruck of flying missiles, cheering her men with encouraging cries. And then, for a good time, one had turmoil, clash of steel, and collision, and confusion of struggling multitudes, and the hoarse bellowing of the guns, and the hiding of it under all a rolling firmament of smoke, a firmament through which veiled vacancies appeared for a moment now and then, giving fitful dim glimpses of the wild, and always at these times one caught sight of white male, which was the center and soul of our hope and trust. And whenever we saw that, with its back to us and its face in the fight, we knew that all was well. At last a great shout went up, a joyous roar of shouting, in fact, and that was a sign sufficient that the faubourgs were ours. Yes, they were ours. The enemy had been driven back within the walls. On the ground which Joan had won, we camped for a night, for night was coming on. Joan sent a summons to the English, promising that if they surrendered, she would allow them to go in peace and take their horses with them. Nobody knew that strong place, but she knew it well. Yet she offered that grace, offered it in a time when such a thing was unknown in war, in a time when it was the custom and usage to massacre the garrison and the inhabitants of captured cities without pity or compunction. Yes, even to the harmless women and children sometimes. There are neighbors all about you who all remember the unspeakable atrocities which Charles the Bold inflicted upon the men and women and children of Denant when he took that place some years ago. It was a unique and kindly grace which Joan offered the garrison, but that was her way. That was her loving and merciful nature. She always did her best to save her enemy's life and his soldier's pride when she had the mastery of him. The English asked 15 days armistice to consider the proposal, and Fastolf coming with 5,000 men. Joan said no, but she offered another grace. They might take both their horses and their sidearms, but they must go within the hour. Well, those bronzed English veterans were pretty hard-headed folk. They declined again. Then Joan gave command that her army be made ready to move to the assault at 9 in the morning. Considering the deal of marching and fighting which the men had done that day, D'Alençon thought the hour rather early, but Joan said it was best so, and so must be obeyed. And she burst out with one of those enthusiasms which were always burning in her when battle was imminent, and said, "Work, work, and God will work with us." Yes, one might say to her that her motto was, "Work, stick to it, keep us working." For in war she never knew what indolence was, and whoever will take that motto and live by it will likely to succeed. There's many a way to win in this world, but none of them is worth much without good hard work to back it. I think we should have lost our big standard bearer that day if our bigger dwarf had not been at hand to bring him out of the melee when he was wounded. He was unconscious and would have been trampled to death by our own horse if the dwarf had not promptly rescued him and haled him to the rear in safety. He recovered and was himself again after 2 or 3 hours, and then he was happy and proud and made the most of his wound and would stagger around in his bandages, showing off like an innocent big child, which is just what he was. He was prouder of being wounded than a really modest person would be of being killed. But there was no harm in his vanity, and nobody minded it. He said he was hit by a stone from a catapult, a stone that the size of a man's head. But the stone grew, of course. Before he got through with it, he was claiming that the enemy had flung a building at him. I like the humor. "Let him alone," said Noel Wright. "Don't interrupt his processes. Tomorrow it will be a cathedral." He said that privately, and sure enough, tomorrow it was a cathedral. I never saw anybody with such an abandoned imagination. Joan was abroad at the crack of dawn, galloping here and there and yonder, examining the situation minutely and choosing when considered when she considered the most effective positions for her artillery. And with such accurate judgment did she place her guns that her lieutenant general's admiration of it still survived in his memory when his testimony quarter of a century later. Oh, it was 25 years later. They let her live 25 years. They let her live 25 years. Pray for us, Jude. Pray for us, Jude. In this testimony, the Duke d'Alençon and that at Jargeau that morning of the 12th of June, she made for her dispositions, unlike a novice, but with the sure and clear judgment of a trained general of 20 or 30 years' experience. The veteran captains of the armies of France said she was great in war in all ways, but greatest of all is her genius for posting and handling artillery. Who taught the shepherd girl to do this with such marvels? She could not read and had no opportunity to ready the complex arts of war. I do not know any way to solve such a baffling riddle as that, there being no precedent for it, nothing in history to compare with it and examine it by. For in history there is no great general, however gifted, who arrived in success otherwise than through able teaching and hard study and some experience. It is a riddle which will never be guessed. I think these vast powers and capacities were born in her, and that she applied them by an intuition which could not err. Alright.